A lot of people always want to know how it was getting the part.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Which was kind of cool. And how many people are familiar with Kevin Yeager, who made the Crypt Keeper? Yeah, it's pretty cool. You know, you'd be surprised at all the things he not only directed, but also created. He's one of the major, creature creators in our business. He made Chucky, and, not only designed him, but built him with all the little servos and, and designed one of the better Freddy Krueger looks, and directed Phantasm 2, I think.
He also directed under the name Alan Smithy, so some of us know what that means.
Yes.
Hellraiser 4.
That's it. Yeah. And but he also directed all the Crypt Keeper sequences, which, as we've all grown to see, is like some of the best out of any of the episodes. There's a lot of great episodes, but some of the Crypt Keeper sequences are hysterical.
We were just talking about that, and Crypty, he just slices off that cheese,
Well, one of my favorites is where he's got, they used to have a commercial, this is your brains on drug, and the drugs in the frying, a brain in a frying pan, and that was a big commercial back in the late 80s, early 90s. So we had the Crypt Keeper, and he's frying a brain in the pan. He goes, "This is your brain on drugs." And then he smashes it with a hammer and goes, "This is your brain on Tales from the Crypt." But he went down to, they had the auditions at Kevin Yeager's studio. So it was kind of cool just for me to get the opportunity. I was doing another show for HBO called First and 10. And he just said, you're getting into that one. And that was a fun show. It was their first series. It was about a football team. O.J. Simpson was the general manager, and Delta Burke owned the team. She had won in a divorce settlement. Caught her husband, doing it with a tight end. And that's actually the storyline.
Yes. That's how they
had some funny guys on it like me. I played the Bulgarian field goal kicker that could kick 60-yard field goals, and Don Gibb, from Revenge of the Nerds, who played, he played over, but he played, what was his character's name? Dr. Death. Dr. Death was a linebacker. You didn't want to mess with him. And they had real football players on the show too. I got to meet a lot of my heroes, but HBO thought of me when they knew that in my stand-up I did all kinds of characters and creatures and that kind of stuff, and they thought it would be cool to have me come audition. So they invited me down to Kevin Yeager's studio, and I was like, "You're kidding, I get to go down to Kevin Yeager's studio and see all this stuff." He was sculpting and all the cool things he had built. And he had a couple of different versions of the Crypt Keeper he was working on, and I'm looking at it going, okay, he's got Rocky teeth, so we'll give him a little bit of juice. He has holes in his throat, so that, some more air is going in than going out. And, I used to do the Wizard of Oz in my stand-up, so I go give him a little Margaret Hamilton laugh, And as mayor of the Munchkin City in the county of the land of Oz, we welcome you most regally. Oh, I got to verify it legally. We represent you. Anyway, so I was like, I'll throw all that stuff in there, and then I started doing it for Kevin, and he was recording me on a boombox with just a little mic, and he probably listened to so many bad versions of the Crypt Keeper at that point. He was just like sitting there like this. I started doing it. He was like, I thought he was going to have a convulsion, And I started laughing because he was getting so geeky about it. I was like, oh great, Crypt Keeper laughs at his own jokes. This is perfect, And
Keeper has more lines than a party in the 80s.
What's that?
The Crypt Keeper has more lines than a party in the 80s.
That's it. It's true. It's true.
And he loves them all.
That's a good one. So I did it next day. He had me doing it for Joel Silver and Dick Donner, who were two of the biggest guys in the entire business. And they're like, okay, we'll see you on the set. You know, I didn't think anything of it. It was HBO, which most people didn't have yet. And it was Tales from the Crypt, which I had collected the comic books as a kid, so I thought it was too obscure to be anything big. And little did I know that your fucked up parents were letting you guys watch it. Or not letting you watch it, and you little demons were sneaking down and watching it when you weren't supposed to, and you know, ensuring my retirement. So,
well, of all the movies I was watching, Tales from the Crypt was the least of their worries.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah,
it's true.
It was tame compared to the
Seems like it now. Seems like it now.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything like that on TV.
Right.
You know, I mean, it was graphic, it was nudity, there was language, and there was puppets.
I love puppets. I was always so intrigued by the mechanics of the puppets. You know, the dolls, the Chucky, the Puppet Master dolls, and Crypt Keeper. And how I remember being like 8 years old, watching it, trying to figure out how they did that, how the mouth worked, how the eyes worked, how many people were in charge of each part of the body. My 8-year-old self was trying to figure all that out, and failing, by the way. But I wanted to know, okay, so Crypt Keeper's manners has changed drastically over the course of the show. Was that an artistic choice, or was that technical limitations
of the
doll?
Well, the Crypt Keeper that we all know and love, that was, you know, throughout the seasons and in the movies, is what I auditioned. But then when I went in and started to record, you know, HBO didn't have a lot of money at that time, so they didn't throw a lot of money at us for him to create a Crypt Keeper puppet. So he started using spare parts. In fact, those are Chucky's spare Chucky's eyes that he used in the Crypt Keeper, which was kind of fun and cool. But he also had all these little motors called servos. There's what they use in remote controlled airplanes and stuff. And so he, you know, he was using those and everything, and the puppet's mouth only worked like this. So if you look at the first season or 2, the Crypt Keeper talks slower and more ominously because the mouth didn't move.
That's what I was wondering. I mean, was it technical or artistic?
Well, both. So then we said, okay, well now we've got more money and he works better. Let's open him up, you know. And of course,
full body show.
You know, I would make them laugh in the studio, and they go, "Oh, we can write something for that thing. We'll do, you know, the Crypt Keeper as Marlon Brando doing a Streetcar Named Desire, you know." And then they started writing this shit, you know. I'd come in and Stella, you know, they put the Crypt Keeper in a torn T-shirt with his bony little arms, and you know, so it evolved that way, you know, technically and artistically. To answer your question, yeah.
I do have a couple of things I want to talk to you about non-Tales from the Crypt before we turn it over to the audience.
Of course.
Oh, we already talked First and 10, of course. I love that show. Can you please talk 3 guys naked from the waist down?
3 guys naked from the waist down. Okay, so this is something that probably none of you know about. Did you research this? Is it something you...
I own the CD and I have to I'm a Broadway nerd. Anyone who knows me will tell you I'm a musical theater nerd, a big time. So I have the CD and I have had it for quite a while. But I would never not see it, obviously. But.
Okay, so I decided, you know, I mean, from the time I was a little kid, I wanted to be an actor, and what was available to me in school was to get into plays. And, you know, I could sing. I mean, I was no, you know, Frank Sinatra, but I could sing, you know, and act singing good enough to get really good parts in musicals throughout school and that kind of thing. And then when I moved to New York, I studied in college and I did theater, including musicals in theater. And when I moved to New York and found out how hard it was to make a living in the theater, I started street performing and doing that kind of thing in front of the Metropolitan Museum. Actually made some really good money doing that, although we never told the government that. But I also got an audition for a play, a musical called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down. And I'm like, you know, the audition was in the Village, which was the gay area of town. I go, what is this, like a gay review? They go, no, it's about stand-up comics. And I was like, oh, awesome, I could do that, you know? So I went and auditioned, and the guys that were the writers and the composer and the director were sitting in the audience and going, we've seen this guy, where have we seen? Oh, we saw you perform in the street, you know, in front of the Metropolitan Museum. You're awesome, let's see you do your audition. So I did my audition, which was me combining my stand-up with their material. And they were like, awesome, you're hired. So I got in this play, had no idea whether it would catch on or not. Scott Bakula, who was just, you know, had come off doing Marilyn on Broadway, which was kind of a flop. He played Joe DiMaggio, but, you know, Scott had made a name for himself as a theater actor. Most of us didn't know who he was yet. Played the, you know, really charming MC kind of guy. And I played this kind of Andy Kaufman-ish type character who was really kind of very kind of damaged and weird and, you know, couldn't really communicate very well except when he was up on stage doing his stand-up. He'd come on and just like hang himself on stage and record it and then get off, you know, and that would be like his act, you know, he did weird stuff. And I got huge reviews for it. It literally launched my career. The next thing I know, you know, it's people from a new show at the time called Star Search. It was in its first season, and they saw me and they go, hey, we want you to be on Star Search. And I'm like, what, is a singer? And they had Sam Harris, and if you know who he is, this guy was singing.
Grease.
Yes. He was singing.
With Rosie O'Donnell and Megan Mullally.
Yeah. What else was he in? I mean, he was also in one of those.
Producers.
He was in one of the Mel Brooks movies too.
He was the replacement in The Producers on Broadway.
That's it. Thank you. But anyway,
Carmen Diaz.
he was just kicking ass and winning week after week. I go, I can't sing like Sam Harris. They go, no, we want you to come on as a stand-up comic. And I'm like, you know, I'm not really a stand-up comic, right? It's a part that I'm playing in the show. They go, well, you know, you can win $100,000. I'm like, fuck, I'll do it. Have you seen my act? I'm going to be working on it next week in the club, you know? So, like, I would go do, you know, they said, well, you have to do 2.5 minutes. And so I would do, like, I would carve down my Wizard of Oz routine into 2.5 minutes, and then I'd win, and then I'd take one of my other bits, and I'd turn it into, like, another 2.5 minute routine. And I kept winning, and I wound up in the semifinals against Rosie O'Donnell, who was unknown at the time, and I beat her, and then I won against Sinbad in the finals. I won $100,000, and the next thing I know, they go, you're gonna open for Tom Jones in Vegas. And I was like, everybody's congratulating me. I can't open for Tom Jones in Vegas. He's like, why not? I go, I have no fucking act. I've been making this shit up as I've been going along. So I started taking all these routines, and I put them into, like, the idea of a guy who's addicted to television, you know? And I could, like, change channels on myself, and I would get up there and, like, talk like I was in a AA meeting and say, I'm John. Hi, John. And I'm a tubaholic. And then he's addicted to television, you know? And I'd go through Star Trek and, you know, Animal Kingdom and all the different things, and I'd go into the Wizard of Oz. And I did all these bits, and I kept, you know, and the next thing I know, I'm opening for the Temptations and the Four Tops, and I'm opening for Richard Belzer and Rodney Dangerfield and Bobby Vinton and all these acts. And that led to, you know, that whole thing led to my television career doing sitcoms. And because I didn't really have any material, per se, jokes, people knew that I did voices and characters in my acting. I think that's why HBO thought of me when they said, have him come down and audition The Crypt Keeper. So it's, you know, my stand-up is kind of responsible for my voiceover career.
Even your first invent was a voice. It wasn't
That's
your
right.
voice.
Zadruski.
Right.
I used to have to make that up. He spoke Bulgarian, but they never wrote anything for me. So
I love your intro on the show when you're on the talk show and you're like,
yeah. Oh, they put me on with
Yes.
Robert Downey Jr.
Yes.
who literally headbutted me on stage, thinking that I was like, when we're acting, you don't actually have to do that. We can make it look like you're actually hitting me without God bless him, he's no longer with us, of course, but I don't know if you guys remember the Robert Downey Jr. Some of the older folks might remember Robert Downey Jr. He was the original antagonist talk show who got people screaming, in the audience and stuff like that, and so they had him on that show.
Yeah. So the other thing that I just love you in, I saw it first run. Who here is a Three Stooges fan? Did you guys ever see the Three Stooges biopic? Made for TV movie 2000, 2001-ish?
2000, we actually, it came out in 2001. So if you look up Three Stooges 2001, you will probably find the movie on YouTube or
I think
wherever.
it's on Crackle or Tubi, one of those.
Oh, great,
right now.
good to know.
Yeah, I got to revisit it about 4 or 5 years ago. They put it on Crackle. And I loved it, and I still do. This is Chef, guys.
Hey Mo, what more can I say?
Yes! Anyway, I just wanted to stooge nerd out real quick.
Oh no,
It
this was
such a
awesome.
good
For those of you who don't know what it was a biopic that Mel Gibson sold to ABC to do, because Mel Gibson has always been a huge Stooge fan. In fact, if you watch his Lethal Weapon movies, he's always going, and a bunch of people and stuff. And he got some really good producers together, went to, there was a biography, the only authorized biography of the Three Stooges' life, and they bought it to make into a television movie, and they got Michael Chiklis playing Curly, and if you watch Sex and the City or Californication, Evan Handler, he's bald on the show, but he played Larry. I actually had auditioned originally for Larry. I used to have, for those of you who used to see me in some of the olden days, do a stand-up, I had like Kramer hair. I had, before Kramer was even on television, people knew me for hair like a racer head. If you know who Razorhead was, that's what my hair looked like. But so they thought of me for Larry originally, went to audition, and they were like, wow, you're really terrific, but we have good choices for Larry, but we don't have a shemp. How about you go prepare us that? And so I went back and got like some greasy wig, with hair on my face, and came in and did shemp for him, and they're like, you're hired.
Do you know how accurate that was for what really happened, or do you not know?
The story, completely. It's completely authorized by the family, and
See, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
I said, is this real or is this?
they may not do it in real time,
Right.
Where they may
Yeah.
cross one thing that happened in proximity to another a lot earlier than it may have been, a year between or something like that, just because you can't do that in a movie.
Right.
But other than that, pretty much everything that was in that was, like the comedy routines we did in the movies were right out of real routines. The boxing routine that I do, I had to study and recreate for the film. And we had an amazing director, and we shot in Australia because that's where Mel's company was set up. And literally, we started shooting the day after the millennium. So they had launched that huge thing from Sydney Harbor, and they were also getting ready for the Olympics that year in Sydney. So it was Sydney in January, February, March, that's their summer. So we got shipped over there to shoot for 3-4 months in the middle of Australian summer. Put us up, literally I looked out the window of my hotel and there was the Opera House. And so it was really one of the most amazing experiences in my career. Not only to play one of my heroes, to play Shemp, but
Poor
to work.
Shemp, man, knowing that actually happened.
Yeah.
Wow, because I never knew if that was
Well, he
really what
both
happened.
died young.
Yeah.
They had strokes, and well, they believe Shemp had a stroke. He either had a stroke or a heart attack. He was in the back. He used to love not only doing boxing routines, but going to the boxing matches. And he was in a cab with one of his dear friends, and he had died. The guy didn't know he died until, but the guy's Shemp's cigar was burning through his pants. Through the guy's pants, he was like, "Hey, Shemp, what's going on? Oh, hey, Shemp." So Shemp, take us to St. Vincent's Hospital. You're like, that's so inappropriate, right? Do you get often asked if they would, if you could, if you play tennis?
Me?
Yeah.
I was forced to when I was a teenager.
And so you're rebelling by saying, I am going to make my hair into a tennis ball.
We're both fans.
I want to do it.
We're both fans of Crazy Taxi. And I drive Uber, so why not?
Exactly. Awesome. I love it, by the way. If I still had hair, I would do that.
I love it too. Okay, now that John is generous enough to let me nerd out about Kristen and the Three Stooges, let's turn it over to the audience. Who got questions? Raise those hands. Wow. No one. Okay, I can keep going if no one wants to speak. Okay. Come on. See, okay, this is a shy group, John, because I was trying to warm them up.
No, it's okay.
I was asking them their favorite episodes and no one had an answer.
You should. People do have questions. They just don't want to sound like they're asking something.
Come on.
Go ahead.
Yes, tennis ball.
You can tell me your real name.
Dominic.
Dominic, thank you.
When did you first decide you wanted to be involved in the entertainment industry?
You know, it wasn't so much the entertainment industry as I wanted to be an actor, or a performer. I mean, even as a little kid, kids in my neighborhood on 4th of July would dress up like clowns and take our riding lawnmowers and turn them into floats. You know, like somebody would take like their styrofoam boat from their pool and put it on there, and we'd do it through the neighborhood. And like our neighborhood, they wouldn't go to the big parade. They'd hang out and, in their cul-de-sacs and wait for us to come by with our lawnmower parade, everything. And I would say, okay, I'm gonna have a circus at the house, it's raining, I'm gonna do a circus at the house, I invite all my friends over. And, I'd go buy penny candy and charge a nickel for it, like they do at the movies with ripping off with, Raisinets, and charge a penny to get in. And I would pretend to be, like I'd put my mother's clothesline on the floor, pretend to be the tightrope walker, and I'd pretend to be on a unicycle, and the clowns, and I would put up a sheet and have two hats to talk to each other, and stuff like that. And so it was really something that I started developing as a kid, because I was dyslexic, and they didn't really know what that was when I was a kid. So they were just like, he's not getting it. He's disruptive. Of course I was disruptive. I wanted to participate. Wanted to do something that made me feel good about myself, that I was good at. And I actually had a teacher in 3rd grade, second time in 3rd grade, by the way. I just was so behind by the time we had moved while I was in my first year in 3rd grade. And that school was so far beyond anything that I had been learning at the other school, and I was already behind. So they were like, okay, he's going to repeat 3rd grade. And that teacher saw that I read better standing in front of the class, or speaking out reading, than I read to myself. Like I could understand it if I read it out loud. So she would have me reading poems in front of the class and stuff like that. Next thing I know, I'm like, pay the rent. But I can't pay the rent. Pay the rent.
The cheese factory.
I pay the rent. Cooks and phone again. It was like doing all that shit and making the class laugh, and that's, I started doing it. So I really had wanted to be an athlete as a kid, and really was quite successful throughout school as an athlete. I played lacrosse. I got scholarships to play lacrosse. There wasn't really any professional lacrosse, at that time. I wanted to play football, but I never got over 135 pounds when I was in high school. And I played on the JV team, but as soon as I practiced one day with the varsity team, I got my ass kicked. So I was like on the soccer. I'd never played soccer. I was on the soccer field the next day. But you realize that being a professional athlete is so far from where you could be. But when I really decided what I was going to study in college, I was like, I'm going for this. My parents were like, you need something to fall back on. You can't make it. And I'm like, anything that I can fall back on, I'm not going to be as good at as what I'm doing here. This feels easier to me. If you told me you're going to become an accountant, I would fail miserably. I couldn't even pass math, So I was like, so I started doing it and excelling in it, and realizing that there was, my first 5 years in New York, I literally, I was not kidding, I literally made more money street performing than they ever made in the theater. My first off-Broadway show, I got paid $175 a week, and that was in 1980, and even then that was shit to live in New York. You know, I was sharing an apartment with 3 people, you know, 1-bedroom apartment. So I was like, you know, you feel so far from, you know, actually saying you're going to make a living at this at that point. But, you know, I was doing gigs in clubs, I was in a comedy group, and we would work in these clubs, and people would go, oh my God, you're gonna have a career. You know, there was enough encouragement off of what I was doing that people, you know, I was trying to, I would make, like I said, if I couldn't make a living doing it, I wanted to make a living doing it any way I could. I did singing balloonograms, I did friggin', you know, street performing, I performed at kids' birthday parties. I did whatever I could because I wanted to make my living as an actor or as a performer. I didn't want to do something else that could take me away from that. And that's where I kept my, you know, nose to the grindstone. And literally, you know, that show 3 Guys Naked, even though I was starting to get known for my comedy and that kind of stuff, that launched me into Star Search, and Star Search launched me into television, you know? One way or another, one of those things, something like that would have put me in the limelight and would have, you know, given me an opportunity to work on a regular basis. And now I've been supporting myself as an actor since 1980, you know, solely as an actor. It wasn't always pretty, but, but you know, once I moved to LA and was working in television, you know, and then voiceover work has kept me working way beyond what most actors in my age group work, because they just don't write as much stuff for you at this age. You know, and it's competitive. Any of the other actors that are still around in my age group, they're all good.
Also, you gotta, like, it's harder in person because they're always looking for a certain look.
Sure.
And you can't help that, but if you are fortunate enough to have the talent of having like a rubbery voice like you do, then...
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not typed out by, you know, I played Deadpool. I'll never get cast on camera as Deadpool. Well, maybe. Who knows? You know, I've got to play creatures and animals and, you know, female characters and baby characters and, you know, dead characters and, you know, so that is, thank you. So that's you know, extended has hugely extended my career, you know, in terms of the level of how much I work now as an actor. And
in the range.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, yeah, you won't have, I would never have that, even as a character actor, I would never get to have that range on camera. I mean, every once in a while, like most of the sitcoms and stuff that I did, they came and went, because unless they
Mr.
did
Rhodes is
Mr.
my favorite
Rhodes.
thing ever. Big Tom Rhodes fan.
I played Gabe Kaplan from Mr. Cotter. Do you guys remember that show? Does anybody remember Welcome Back, Cotter?
Heard of it.
They had, it was a show, and this guy, Gabe Kaplan, who was not well liked in the business, by the way. I never thought he was a great actor, but he was perfect as that character. And it was the show that made John Travolta. John Travolta was Vinnie Barbarino, and basically he was the teacher to all these misfit, kids in his class who should have graduated years ago. And but none of the actors liked Gabe Kaplan. So they were doing a flashback episode, you know, Mr. Rhodes, with this teacher was imagining himself, you know, to be the best teacher on TV, and it was Mr. Cotter. And when the other actors found out that they were going to get Gabe Kaplan, they were like, well, we're not going to do it. Because they didn't want to work with him. And they were like, hey, you know, let's get another actor to play Gabe Kaplan. So they called me in, they go, can you do Gabe Kaplan? I go, I've never done it, but I guess I could. You know, and I started going for it, and they're like, oh my God, the difference between you and him is you're funny. And so I was like, oh my God, you guys showed him no respect. Because one of the writers actually had written on Welcome Back, Cotter for that show. And they put me in prosthetics. And basically, they did such a great job with the prosthetics. It was like one of the people from Saturday Night Live or something. But the prosthetics looked so good. I looked like an older Gabe Kaplan on steroids. His face is blown up, you know. And so when I came out, the audience thought I was Gabe Kaplan, you know, the live audience that we were shooting in front of. And all the other actors that were on the show, you know, that had worked with them, would give me they're going, you're almost there. You know, they go, just stick your tongue between your teeth and you talk like this and you got them. And they would like give me all these little hints that I could like layer on throughout the week. Because I think I only had 3 days to prepare it before we shot it. You know, and so it was pretty amazing to play Mr. Carter.
Yeah. No, that was one of my favorite shows back in 1996 or 7, and I was a figure skater back then.
Really?
And yes, and so when I came back from like a 14-day at the rink or whatever, I put on Mr. Rhodes for the year that it was on. I taped it.
Right. But I was saying, you know, all those shows came and went.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, every once in a while somebody would go, oh, look, there's John Kassir on Friends, you know, one episode I could do, or there is on CSI, or that kind of thing. But there was shows where I was the main character on it, but they didn't do enough episodes where they were in syndication, you know. And those were like, you know, my big, you know, career money-making gigs back in the day. But, you know, those things came and went in the prime of your on-camera career, but, you know, the voiceover stuff has kept me working. I mean, I really not only enjoy the shit out of it, but also am grateful that I was able to establish myself at a time where, like, everybody wasn't trying to do it. Like, everybody wants to do voiceover now. You know, it's like, you can do it from home. During the pandemic, I worked out of my studio at home. I did all my jobs there, you know, which was great.
Any questions?
Yeah, actually, I do have one.
Jordan it is, right?
Yes. You had tons of celebrities on the show, either in the episode or in the introduction. How would you have felt if Chucky had helped with an introduction for an episode?
That's great. Well, she was saying that with all the celebrities that we have on Tales from the Crypt, and at first, you know, everybody's like, you'll never get all these people on the show. You don't have any money, blah, 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 blah. I was like, are you kidding? We got the biggest producers in Hollywood, first of all. And secondly, we got directors that were, you know, Frankenheimer and Toby Hooper. I mean, we had like amazing we had actors who wanted to direct, Tom Hanks and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Michael Keaton.
Did
And
Michael J. Fox do it?
Michael J. Fox directed an episode, you know, so people got to do, you know, come on that show and do something that they didn't get to do normally. So that's why everybody wanted to do it. And, but we tried to bring back, you know, obviously it's tough to bring a different licensed character onto another licensed show, which is why we're not back on the air, because we don't own the licensing anymore. We haven't been able to get it back from EC Comics, sadly. But, you know, that would be the ultimate. I'm sure Kevin Yeager would have loved that had Chucky on with the Crypt Keeper. There was some really funny moments with that, you know. And some of the stuff we did with the Crypt Keeper, the Christmas album, you know, the movies, the cartoon, you know. I kept saying we should do a live version of Tales from the Crypt for kids, you know, of course, because Goosebumps was coming out and all this stuff. I was like, why aren't we doing this? They're like, nah, we got the cartoons, too scary for kids. Little we know kids were actually watching the full-blown version of it, so.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe it was 8 or 9 years old. I had a book that I proudly bought at the Scholastic Book Fair, Jokes from the Crypt Keeper.
Really?
And it was bad, just like it. Good. Lots of puns.
I remember when I was auditioning, there was other actors sitting in Kevin's studio looking at the script going, be careful what you ask for, you may get it. They're like, this is terrible. And I'm going, they don't get it. This is Shakespeare to the Crypt Keeper. This is awesome. They didn't get it. You know what they didn't get? I'm sure that what they were doing is they were trying to make him scary and as creepy as possible. And, you know, because of me growing up with the comic books, I knew that he's supposed to let you know it's fun. He's supposed to let you know that you can laugh at this if you want. Yeah. You know, so totally tongue in cheek if I had one. But you know, and I think that was another aspect to the personality of the Crypt Keeper that I was able to, you know, capture enough that they hired me for it, you know. So he's kind of like, I like to say the Crypt Keeper is kind of like the ride up to the top of the roller coaster. You know how when you're a kid, a lot of people come up to me and go, I was scared shitless of the Crypt Keeper, but I had to watch it anyway. And now I'm really into horror. It's exactly the same way with the roller coaster. The first time somebody dares you to go on a roller coaster, you go, I'm not going on that thing. And then you go on, and that ride up, because the anticipation is so freaking scary, whether the roller coaster is awesome or sucks, the ride up is always good, you know. But then once you go on, you're like, oh, I want a bigger one, I want a badder one, I want a creepier, scarier one, you know. And it's the same with horror, and you know, the Crypt Keeper popped your scary little boils and ghouls, and was the gateway drug to horror.
Anyone else have any
Did you have one? Or
questions?
you're just clapping?
I'm just glad because I love you.
Just so happy.
I'm so happy for you to be here.
You're so awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, I got one for you. If
Yes.
no one's going to speak up?
I guess I got
Yes, thank you.
more of a random joke, but do you think that like Emotep was at all inspired by the Crypt Keeper? Like because I mean I personally feel like maybe.
Totally. I mean, you know,
Think of the fact
they're coming up from the dead. You know what's amazing though, even more than just this Crypt Keeper, you look at any horror stuff, all the movies, all the TV shows and everything, if you go pick up some Tales from the Crypt comic books or some of those old comic books, all the artwork in those have all been used in all the sets and the costumes and the masks and the creatures, they're all there. Any shrunken head you've ever seen reproduced is off the cover of a Tales from the Crypt comic book. Any, swamp thing came out of Tales from the Crypt. The artists that they got for those comic books were amazing. I can't tell you how many artists come up to me on a regular basis at these conventions, and their work is incredible, and how much they were influenced by those artists from the past. They're pretty amazing stuff. Tales from the Crypt, the series, some directors even went so far as to, because we didn't have the budget, they would have to create sets and stuff that look kind of campy. Like they go, oh, we're supposed to be in New Orleans. Okay, well, we need some Spanish moss. So, they'd have some guy standing with a pole hanging Spanish moss in front of the lens, so it looked like they were surrounded by Spanish moss. Meanwhile, it was just one little piece of fur hanging in front of the camera. You can't tell. That's old school movie making. But let me tell you something. They have something called storyboards. When they're doing a movie, what they do is somebody designs shots for the cinematographer, like an angle of what this might look like, and then we're going to go to a fly landing on a bowl, and we're going to go to this, and they do these storyboards. Well, they were using the comic books as storyboards.
Aren't comic books basically storyboards?
They basically are. You are very correct. Good question. So, yes, of course, you're right. You could probably say that about a lot of...
I would say the Crypt Keeper is hotter than Emotep, but that's
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, the Crypt Keeper always like to say, have I got a bone for you?
So, John,
He is kind of charming and cute. I think that even though it was an accident, Kevin Yeager's, instincts to put Chucky's, baby blue eyes in there really was quite a great thing. He's just so gleeful. There's something fun and kind of debonair about him.
yes, I especially love when you all put him in a suit.
Oh yeah,
I
tuxedo.
Yes, I love.
And his scrimmy hair.
That was so nice. I really geeked out over the shots where we were lucky enough to get a full body and you could see his little feet going.
Oh, there's a little woman. I wish I could remember her name.
Wow, really?
It's probably, you could probably find it on IMDb or something. I have a tabletop book by Dickie Deal that's a really cool tabletop book about Tales from the Crypt. And it shows all the different positions puppeteers had to get in to make the Crypt Keeper work. And this buraku, Japanese style of puppetry, where you know, the main puppeteer is working the head and the left arm, and the other puppeteer, I mean, is working the right arm. So they, you know, they had to coordinate 2 hands, and then 3 different guys work in the face.
I was going to ask how many on the face. With all the eyebrows.
Brock Winkless is the name of the puppeteer that would work the mouth. And I remember Brock because we had to do live interviews and stuff like that. He'd be watching me, talking and following me at the same time. He might be that much behind me, but you couldn't tell on camera. He'd be like, "Hello, kids." And he had this head thing on that looked like, you know, when somebody has hurt their neck and they have to be in, what do they call it, a halo? He had to have a thing like that, similar. And when he moved his mouth, it moved the jaw, and it had these cables that work. Nowadays, they probably do it with remote control, but it would move the jaw, and then he had these toggle switches that moved the mandolin and the lips. So he'd be like, "Hello, kitties, how are you?" You know, and then another guy had to work like the eyebrows and this, and another guy worked like the eyeballs and the tongue. And these guys were so good, they coordinate together to make one thing. You know, I would pre-record the voice, and they would record me, because I tended to be the crypt keeper in the, you know, the session when I would do it. And so they could see what I was doing, and then they could rehearse, kind of like what you do when you shoot a rock video. When you shoot a rock video, you're lip syncing to your own song, but you know, they would pre-record that, and then you would lip sync from, you know, so that you could change all these different camera angles and not have to sing over and over and over again and try to match the music. It's the same with the crypt keeper. They would be able to rehearse with me, but they got so good we could do live interviews where I was off camera talking and the camera's on the puppet, and they're working the puppet watching me going, you know, this whole thing is pretty great. It's pretty cool.
I saw some of those interviews, and I wondered how that worked too. I'm like, is this scripted? How did
We
they know,
did
right?
the Horror Hall of Fame Awards from the Conan stage at Universal. It was televised a couple of years, and Robert Englund was one of the hosts, and I was the other, Crypt Keeper was the other host. Like, it's really me. But the Crypt Keeper, you know, I'm off stage, like, going, "Okay, here's something really scary, a commercial," you know, stuff like that, you know. And meanwhile, we're giving awards to Vincent Price and George Romero and stuff like that. It was such a cool thing, and we're doing this live, shooting it live. It was pretty cool. So that's how good they were. And I know that if they were talking about if we ever got picked up again or doing it again, they were like talking about how, oh, you could do it CGI, and you know, we could put all the dots on your face. And I was like, no. Do you know the reason why it has an audience that started out at 5 years old was because it was a fucking puppet.
CGI
It was
ages
like,
so
you know,
badly.
it's like a puppet. Puppets are cool.
CGI just ages so badly.
What's that?
It aged out like CGI does.
Oh, it does.
Ooh.
It does.
Yeah, no.
There are cooler ways to do it, and people are like, "Oh, we're gonna put you in prosthetics." I was like,
Why?
"It would be like a fat crypt keeper." Not that I'm fat, but you'd have to put the skinny crypt keeper
to
over
load
the
on.
exactly over the regular side. I was like, that's more work than doing the puppets.
Yeah.
But you know, it always came down to, you know, those things and those decisions a lot of time came down to money, because it was an expensive show to do, even though everybody was working for scale, and you know, they got even the star actors to come on and work for scale and stuff like that. You know, it still was expensive to produce because there's a lot of stuff going on in there. Everything was created. It wasn't like you could just show up with a camera, you know, on a back street and shoot, you know. Yeah.
I have one final wrap-up question for you. We're going to get a little serious, okay? I know. You hate me, I know. Well, it's just because you, John, you're an inspirational performer, but also an inspirational person in what you share with us. I want to know, what is your philosophy?
My philosophy? Gosh,
What keeps you going, man?
at this point, it's, well, one of the people, to other performers or artists, I mean, very often, you know, and every artist asks this question when they're looking from their street performing part of their life. They're listening and going, how do you get there? And it's like you dare to dream. And by that I mean you dare to dream, go after your dream, even at the cost of maybe not getting it. And that's the only way you do get it. Because you have to take the risk of not getting it to get it, of going for it with everything you have in order to get there. And this is kind of the dichotomy to that is as you get older, you'll have mentors tell you your whole life, oh, you enjoy today because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and you can't change the past and, all these things. And people tell you that, but as you get older, you realize you not only believe that as a philosophy, you start to live that because, you deal with, you're a cancer survivor, or you lose somebody close to you and you realize that life is short, or you deal with things every day that you can't control, that, mess up your future plans that you had. When we're young, we're hardwired to go after the brass ring as hard as we can. And because of that, you don't even realize you're getting there. And so you're sitting there going, oh, well, yesterday I just wanted to be here, but today I want to be there, And so you're not really enjoying being here while you're doing it. So, as you get older, you realize you can afford to spend the time being here, being present every day, doing what you're doing, I'm glad to be here with you guys today.
Be present, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
I'm here too.
And be careful what you ask for. You may get it.